When we register new users, we know that we get back some automatically created user data from Firebase. For the purposes of our app, we want to change some of these values. So if we register a new user and take a look at that user object, we see first that display name is set to null. We want to use display name to store the user's username in our app. Also, photo URL is set to null. This is where we want to store the user's avatar image. So back in the then statement where we're registering our user, we'll comment out set state and take the created user object, and on the user property we have this update profile method which we'll use to give display name the value of the username input and pass a URL to photo URL where we'll get an avatar from gravatar.com/avatar, and then we will import a function called MD5 from the package MD5. Now MD5 is usually used to hash messages. We'll be using it to create a unique value to provide to the gravatar.com/avatar URL, and we'll take the user email from createdUser.user.email, since it's a unique value as required by Firebase, pass it to MD5. And then after we interpolate this value, we'll add $D equals identicon to get a avatar image generated for each new user. We'll add a then statement after that, and within the then we'll set state and our loading property to false, and after that we'll catch any errors in a catch block, as well as set those errors in state by concatenating onto the errors array the error that we're getting, as well as set loading to false there. We'll save all that, and we'll head back to our app, and we'll try registering a new user. And we'll take a look at the user data that comes back from Firebase. As we can see, we have display name set to the username value that we provided, and in photo URL we should have an avatar image with our gravatar.com URL. If we save this object as a global variable in our console, and then we access the photo URL path, if we copy that link and open it in a new tab, should be able to see our avatar image that was generated by Gravatar. And now that we're adding a username and avatar to the user that's just been registered, within the then statement where we're setting the loading property of state to false, we're going to instead call a function saveUser where we pass in the created user and add a then block where in the body we're just going to log user saved. So as the then indicates, this will be a promise, and underneath handle submit we'll create a save user function where it'll take created user, and we want save user to save the users that we're registering to our database. So back in our Firebase console, we'll click on the database tab on the left hand side, and we'll scroll down to where we have the option for real-time database, and we'll click on create database. We want to start in test mode to allow all reads and writes for the time being, and then click on enable to set up our Firebase database. So we can click on this plus button, and we can take a look at what this collection will look like for our users. We'll have an array of users for every new user that registers. We'll have a unique ID for them, and on that ID we're going to include information about the user that just registered, their display name value, their name that they provided, as well as their photo URL, which will be gravatar.com/something. And so it'll look something like this, where we'll have a users collection, an array of users with their unique IDs, and within them their specific information. But we'll delete that sample collection, and go back to our code editor to actually implement that. So within save user, we're going to return a users ref. We're first going to need to create a users ref property in state, which is going to reference the collection that we just took a look at. It'll be at the path firebase.database.ref with the string of users. So this will reference that collection of data where all of our users will be added. And we can put a child piece of data on it with the child method. And we want to put their ID, and we'll get that with createdUser.user.uid. If you're interested at taking a look at what that is, when we get our user information back upon registering, we have this unique UID value at the very bottom of the user object. So that's what we're going to be setting as a child in our users collection in our database. And we're going to use the set method to set an object on that unique ID for our user, and we'll have a name property which will reference the username at createdUser.user.displayName, and an avatar property, createdUser.user.photoURL, the two things that we just set on our user data object. So we'll save that. We'll try registering another user. We'll hit submit. We can see our user data created by Firebase, our user saved log that we provided to the then statement after executing our save user function and updating the profile of the created user. So if we head back to our database, we see this new users collection with a unique ID for the newly created user as a child and the user's avatar and name within it.